Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales. I'm your host, Evelyn Whitaker. If you're new here, we dive deep into classic whodunits inspired by the great Agatha Christie, perfect for relaxing with a cup of tea or drifting off to sleep. Tonight we have a special long-form story, Sinister Matron of Thornscar Infirmary, featuring the legendary Hercule Poirot. This is a 10-chapter epic, clocking in at over 90 minutes of narration, ideal for those cozy evenings. Grab your blanket, dim the lights, and let's begin. Oh, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Is it a rainy London flat or a sunny California porch? I'd love to know. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Mist Autumn, 1927. The English countryside stretched like a patchwork quilt under a sky heavy with the promise of rain. In Devon, where the moors whispered secrets to those who dared listen, Thornscar Infirmary stood as a somber monument to the past. A relic of the Great War, its gray stone walls now a private sanatorium for the affluent and the afflicted. The estate, owned by Lord Reginald Thornscar, sprawled across acres of fading grandeur. Its manor house a Gothic silhouette against the mist, connected to the infirmary by a serpentine gravel path lined with gnarled oaks, their branches clawing at the fog. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with his meticulously waxed mustache and egg-shaped head, was not here on a case. No, this visit was meant for respite, a rare pause for the man whose little gray cells rarely rested. His friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, had been insistent, his jovial voice ringing through their last telephone call in London. "Poirot, mon ami, you're working yourself to the bone. The country air at Thornscar will rejuvenate you, clear the mind, sharpen those famous deductions." Hastings, ever the loyal companion, had his own reasons for enthusiasm. Whispers of fine pheasant shooting on the estate had reached his ears, and his love for a good hunt rivaled his loyalty to Poirot. Their arrival at Thornscar was met with the quiet pomp of a fading aristocracy. The manor's heavy oak doors creaked open, revealing Lord Reginald Thornscar himself, a gaunt figure in his early 60s, his face etched with lines of chronic pain and old sorrows. His gout, a constant companion, gave his movements a stiff deliberation, and his eyes carried the weight of a man burdened by more than physical ailments. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a trembling hand, "your reputation precedes you. I trust you'll find peace here, far from the clamor of London." His voice was gravelly, tinged with a weariness that belied the estate's opulence. Beside him stood Lady Evelyn Thornscar, a woman in her mid-50s whose beauty, though faded, still lingered in the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the piercing blue of her eyes. Her auburn hair, streaked with silver, was swept into an elegant chignon, and her silk gown whispered of wealth carefully curated. "We're delighted to have you, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her smile practiced but not warm. "Do make yourself at home. Our matron, Nurse Matilda Crowe, ensures the infirmary runs with precision. You'll find her formidable." And formidable she was. Nurse Matilda Crowe, the so-called sinister matron of local lore, emerged from the shadows of the manor's grand hall like a specter of order. In her mid-40s, she was a towering figure, her steel-gray hair pinned into a severe bun. Her nurse's uniform starched to an almost military crispness. Her eyes, a cold slate gray, seemed to dissect those she gazed upon, and her voice carried the low rumble of distant thunder. "Gentlemen," she said, her tone clipped, "your rooms are prepared in the manor. Meals are served at 8 sharp. Deviations are not tolerated." Poirot, ever observant, noted the way her hands, large and capable, clasped her ledger as if it were a weapon. There was no warmth in her demeanor, only an unyielding authority that commanded the space around her. The infirmary and manor were home to a cast of characters as varied as they were intriguing, each adding a thread to the tapestry of Thornscar. Dr. Elias Blackwood, the chief physician, was a man in his mid-30s, handsome in a brooding way, with dark hair and a quick smile that never quite reached his hazel eyes. His charm was undeniable, yet there was an evasiveness to him, a habit of toying with his stethoscope when questioned too closely. He blended modern medical knowledge with an odd penchant for old superstitions, often muttering about the humors of his patients. Miss Lydia Hargrove, a nurse in her early 20s, was Nurse Crow's opposite in every way. Petite, with doe-like brown eyes and a nervous energy that made her seem perpetually on edge. Her blonde curls escaped her cap, and her hands trembled slightly as she carried trays or adjusted bandages. Poirot noticed a faint bruise on her wrist, half hidden by her sleeve, and wondered, an accident or something more sinister? She scurried under Nurse Crow's shadow, her deference tinged with fear. The patients, too, were a study in contrasts. Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, a retired military man in his late 50s, bore the scars of the Boer War in his pronounced limp and gruff demeanor. His ruddy face and bristling white mustache gave him the air of a lion caged, his complaints about the infirmary's soft modern ways a constant refrain. Mrs. Violet Pembroke, a wealthy widow in her early 60s, was the picture of hypochondria, her plump fingers always clutching a string of pearls as she recounted ailments both real and imagined. Her gossip, delivered in a conspiratorial whisper, was as sharp as her needlepoint. Then there was Mr. Julian Thorne, Lord Thornscar's nephew and heir presumptive, a lanky artist in his late 20s whose boyish charm was marred by the pallor of dissipation. His dark hair fell rakishly. Over his forehead and his eyes, a striking green held a restless energy. Officially at Thornscar to recover from nervous exhaustion, it was clear to Poirot that Julian's ailment owed more to London's nightlife, cards, drink, and perhaps worse, than to any medical condition. His sketches scattered about his room were vivid and chaotic, hinting at a mind both brilliant and troubled. That evening, the Manor's drawing room hosted a gathering, the fire in the hearth casting flickering shadows on the oak-paneled walls. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and old money, and the conversation revealed the undercurrents of tension that ran through Thornscar like veins in marble. Lord Thornscar, seated in a high-backed chair, spoke of the estate's financial strain. "The infirmary is a drain," he admitted, his voice heavy. "My late brother's trust keeps it afloat, but for how long?" Julian, lounging with a glass of brandy, smirked. "Uncle, why not sell to those developers circling like vultures? Modernize the old pile." Lady Evelyn's eyes flashed with indignation. "Julian, mind your tongue. Thornscar is our legacy." The young man shrugged, undeterred, his nonchalance a calculated provocation. Colonel Fitzroy, nursing a whiskey, muttered about decadent youth, while Mrs. Pembroke leaned toward Hastings, her pearls clicking softly. "They say Nurse Crow knows secrets about everyone here," she whispered. "A woman like that, dangerous." Poirot's ears pricked at this, his gaze drifting to the matron who stood by the tea tray, her movements precise as she poured. Her presence seemed to quell the room, her silence louder than the chatter. Hastings, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Fine place for a rest, eh, Poirot? All this history." But Poirot was not listening. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, moved from face to face, noting the subtle tells. Lady Evelyn's tight grip on her fan, Dr. Blackwood's fidgeting, Miss Hargrove's averted gaze, Julian's sly smile. Motives, he knew, were like seeds buried in the soil of human hearts. Greed, jealousy, revenge. They needed only the right conditions to sprout. As the evening drew to a close, the fog outside thickened, curling around the manor like a living thing. Poirot retired to his room, a modest but comfortable chamber overlooking the infirmary. He stood at the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "Mon ami," he murmured to himself. Thornscar is no place for rest. The air is heavy with secrets. He did not yet know that death was already waiting in the wings, its shadow lengthening across the estate. The sinister matron, Nurse Matilda Crowe, held the key to those secrets, or so it seemed. But in the world of Hercule Poirot, appearances were rarely what they seemed. And so the stage was set, the players assembled, and the curtain of mystery rose on Thornscar Infirmary. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The morning after their arrival at Thornscar Infirmary, the Devon countryside lay shrouded in a fog so dense it seemed to swallow sound itself. The air was damp, carrying the earthy scent of moss and the faint tang of coal smoke from the manor's chimneys. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, rose with the dawn, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the gravel path as he strolled toward the infirmary. His mind, sharp despite the hour, was already cataloguing the previous evening's observations. The strained civility, the veiled barbs, the undercurrents of resentment that swirled among the residents of Thornscar. Captain Hastings, less inclined to early mornings, joined him reluctantly, puffing on his pipe as he adjusted his tweed cap. "Jolly place, Poirot, but there's something about that matron, Nurse Crowe, gives me the creeps. Like she's watching your soul." Poirot's lips twitched beneath his meticulously waxed mustache. "Mon ami, you see shadows where there is only discipline. But rest assured, the little gray cells, they are watching too." His eyes, bright and piercing, scanned the infirmary's silhouette ahead, a squat stone building with barred windows, a remnant of its wartime use as a field hospital. The fog clung to its walls, lending it an air of secrecy as if it guarded truths best left buried. Inside the infirmary was a stark contrast to the manor's faded opulence. The air was sharp with the bite of carbolic soap, and the linoleum floors gleamed under the harsh light of bare bulbs. Dr. Elias Blackwood greeted them at the entrance, his handsome face breaking into a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. "Good morning, gentlemen. Care for a tour of our little kingdom?" His voice was smooth, but his fingers toyed nervously with his stethoscope, a tic Poirot noted with interest. They followed him through the wards, where rows of empty beds stood like silent sentinels, save for the few occupied by Thornscar's patients. Colonel Bertram Fitzroy sat propped against pillows, his ruddy face twisted in a scowl as he pushed away a bowl of porridge. "Damned gruel. In my day, a man got proper food," he barked, his Boer War limp evident even in repose. Mrs. Violet Pembroke in the next ward lay dozing with a lavender compress over her eyes, her pearls glinting faintly as she murmured about her latest ailment. Young Julian Thorne, Lord Thornscar's nephew, was in a private room sprawled across his bed with a sketchbook, charcoal smudging his fingers. His green eyes flicked up briefly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Detective Poirot, come to solve the mystery of my boredom?" Overseeing this domain was Nurse Matilda Crowe, the sinister matron, her presence as imposing as the infirmary itself. She stood at a nurse's station, her steel-gray hair pinned tightly, her uniform a study in precision. Her ledger open before her was filled with meticulous notes. Every patient's condition, every dose administered, every minute accounted for. "Miss Hargrove," she snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet. The young nurse, Lydia Hargrove, fumbled a tray of instruments, her face paling. "Careless girl, mind your hands." Poirot's sharp eyes caught the bruise on Lydia's wrist again, now more visible in the light. A faint purple mark, too deliberate to be a mere accident. He filed it away, a piece of the puzzle yet to be placed. The morning passed in quiet observation. Poirot and Hastings returned to the manor for lunch, a formal affair in the dining room where heavy drapes muted the gray light. Lord Reginald Thornscar presided, his gaunt frame hunched over a plate of cold ham. The infirmary's costs are bleeding us dry, he announced abruptly, his voice tinged with frustration. Nurse Crow, we may need to reduce staff. The matron standing by the sideboard stiffened, her gray eyes narrowing. My lord, efficiency is my guarantee. Cut staff and standards will fall. Her tone was cold, a challenge veiled as deference. Julian, picking at his food, grinned slyly. Aunt Evelyn, why not sell those jewels of yours? Fund the place for years. Lady Evelyn's fork paused mid-air, her face flushing. Julian, your insolence is tiresome. Colonel Fitzroy muttered about modern disrespect while Mrs. Pembroke leaned toward Hastings, whispering, They say Nurse Crow keeps a file on everyone. Secrets, you know. Poirot, sipping his soup, noted every glance, every inflection. The room was a cauldron of motives, money, pride, fear. After lunch, Poirot retired to the Manor's library, a cavernous room of leather-bound books and dust motes dancing in slanted light. He pored over a history of Thornscar, learning of its wartime role in Nurse Crow's past as a battlefield nurse, rumored to have been both hero and villain. Hastings, restless, explored the grounds, overhearing fragments of tension. Dr. Blackwood and Nurse Crow in the infirmary's garden, their voices low but heated. You can't keep this up, Matilda, Blackwood said, his tone urgent. It's too risky. Crow's reply was inaudible, but her shadow loomed as she turned away. Later, Hastings glimpsed Miss Hargrove near the oak path, alone, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. As dusk settled, the fog thickened, wrapping Thornscar in a ghostly embrace. Poirot and Hastings dined lightly in their rooms, the Manor's silence broken only by the distant creak of floorboards. Poirot was reviewing his notes, suspects, motives, that bruise, when a scream pierced the evening, sharp and chilling. It came from the infirmary, specifically the isolation ward, a locked room reserved for the most severe cases. Hastings leapt to his feet, pipe forgotten. Good Lord, Poirot, what was that? Poirot, calm but alert, grabbed his cane. Quickly, mon ami. The game. It begins. They hurried through the fog, their footsteps crunching on gravel, joined by Lord Thornscar and Dr. Blackwood, who had also heard the cry. The isolation ward was at the infirmary's far end, its heavy oak door bolted from the inside, the key visible in the lock. No windows offered entry. The room was sealed, a fortress of solitude. Blackwood pounded on the door, calling, Matilda, open up! Silence answered. Lord Thornscar, his face ashen, produced a spare key, but it was unnecessary. The door was bolted, not locked. With effort, Blackwood and Hastings forced it open, the bolt splintering. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the metallic scent of death. Nurse Matilda Crow sat slumped over her desk, her starched uniform crumpled, her face frozen in a rictus of agony. In her right hand she clutched a small glass vial, half empty, its contents reeking of bitter almonds, cyanide. A note lay beneath her fingers, the ink still wet. Forgive me. The sinister matron was dead, an apparent suicide in a locked room. The vial, the note, the bolted door, all pointed to a woman who had chosen her end. Yet Poirot's gray cells stirred, restless. He knelt, examining the scene with clinical precision. The desk cluttered with ledgers, a fountain pen uncapped, a single drop of ink on the blotter. The bolt was intact, the key undisturbed. No footprints marred the floor, no windows offered escape. Yet something was wrong, something Poirot could not yet name. Hastings, pale, whispered, Suicide, surely, poor woman. But Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mon ami, the simplest explanation is rarely the true one. This room, it tells a story, but not the one it seems. He straightened, his voice soft but firm. We have a murder, Hastings, and the murderer, they are still among us. Dr. Blackwood, his hands trembling, confirmed the poison. Cyanide, quick, brutal. From our stores, I'd wager. Lord Thornscar, shaken, stammered, "But why?" She was the backbone of this place. Lady Evelyn, arriving late, gasped at the sight, her hand flying to her throat. Miss Hargrove, hovering at the door, wept silently, her bruised wrists stark against her pale skin. Julian, summoned from his room, stared with a strange detachment, his artist's eyes taking in the scene as if it were a tableau to sketch. Word spread through the manor like wildfire, servants whispering, patients stirring. The local constable would be summoned, but for now Thornscar was a world unto itself, sealed by fog and suspicion. Poirot stood in the center of the room, his small frame commanding despite the chaos. "We must preserve this scene," he declared. "Every detail, every shadow, it speaks." The fog outside seemed to press closer, as if conspiring to keep Thornscar's secrets locked within its walls. The death of Nurse Matilda Crowe was no simple tragedy. It was a puzzle, an impossible crime, and Hercule Poirot was determined to solve it. Chapter 3. The Locked Door Enigma. The fog that cloaked Thornscar Infirmary seemed to thicken with the weight of Nurse Matilda Crowe's death, as if the very air mourned the loss, or concealed the truth. The morning after the grim discovery in the locked isolation ward, the manor and its infirmary buzzed with a nervous energy, servants whispering in corridors, patients peering from doorways. Hercule Poirot stood in the manor's drawing room, his small, fastidious figure a stark contrast to the chaos of suspicion swirling around him. His waxed mustache gleamed under the chandelier's dim light, and his green eyes, sharp as cut glass, missed nothing. Captain Hastings, pacing by the hearth, rubbed his hands together. "Good Lord, Poirot, a suicide in a locked room? It's ghastly but straightforward, surely." Poirot's lips curled slightly, a gesture that spoke of skepticism rather than amusement. "Mon ami, nothing at Thornscar is straightforward. The locked room, the poison, the note, these are pieces of a puzzle, but not the picture itself. We are dealing with a murder, Hastings, and the murderer walks among us." His voice, soft and precise, carried a weight that silenced the room's murmurs. Lord Reginald Thornscar, his gaunt face paler than usual, had summoned the local constable, a plodding man named Inspector Grayson, who arrived with a notebook and an air of deference. "Monsieur Poirot," Grayson said, bowing slightly, "Lord Thornscar insists you take the lead. Your reputation for unraveling the impossible precedes you. Was it truly suicide, or—" He trailed off, glancing nervously at the assembled residents. Poirot inclined his head. "We shall see, Inspector. First, we return to the scene." The group, Poirot, Hastings, Grayson, and Dr. Elias Blackwood, made their way to the infirmary's isolation ward, where Nurse Crowe's body had been left undisturbed, covered now with a sheet. The room was as they had left it, a small, sterile space with one heavy oak door bolted from the inside, the key still in the lock. The windows barred and sealed since the war offered no entry or exit. The desk, cluttered with ledgers and a fountain pen, bore the weight of death, a half-empty vial of cyanide, its bitter almond scent lingering, and the note in Crowe's hand, "Forgive me." Poirot knelt, his gloved hands moving with surgical precision. The vial, he noted, was from the infirmary's stores, labeled in Crowe's neat script. The note's ink was fresh, the handwriting unmistakably hers, yet the phrasing, "Forgive me," struck him as oddly vague for a woman of such precision. He examined the bolt, sturdy, no signs of tampering. The floor was clean, no footprints or scuffs, yet his gray cells churned. "The room, it is too perfect," he murmured. "A stage set for suicide, perhaps too carefully arranged." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "But how, Poirot? The door was bolted, the windows sealed. If it's murder, how did the killer get in and out?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the enigma. But every lock has a key. literal or otherwise. Back in the manor, Poirot began his interrogations, gathering the residents in the dining room, where the air was thick with tension and the scent of polished wood. 5 suspects emerged, each with a motive as clear as the fog was opaque. Lord Reginald Thornscar. The estate's financial ruin loomed large. Had Nurse Crowe known of his rumored embezzlement from his late brother's trust, funds meant to sustain the infirmary? His gout-ridden hands trembled as he spoke. She was indispensable, but her demands for resources were excessive. Lady Evelyn Thornscar. Whispers of a youthful affair between her husband and Crowe, now long buried, surfaced in Mrs. Pembroke's gossip. Did jealousy drive her? Matilda was a tyrant, she said coldly. But suicide? Absurd. She was too stubborn for that. Dr. Elias Blackwood. The charming physician clashed with Crowe over the infirmary's direction, his modern methods against her rigid control. His nervous fidgeting with his stethoscope betrayed unease. We argued, yes, over treatments, budgets. But murder? I'm a healer, not a killer. Mr. Julian Thorne. The dissolute nephew stood to inherit if the estate survived. Crowe, it was rumored, held evidence of his gambling debts, threatening to expose him to Lord Thornscar. He smirked, lounging in his chair. Auntie Crowe? She loathed my art, my life, but I didn't care enough to kill her. Miss Lydia Hargrove. The young nurse's bruise suggested mistreatment by Crowe, her aunt. Was it revenge for years of cruelty? Her voice quavered. She was harsh, yes, but I didn't. Her eyes filled with tears, her hands twisting her apron. The remaining residents, Colonel Bertram Fitzroy and Mrs. Violet Pembroke, provided alibis for each other. They had been taking tea in the manor's conservatory at the time of the scream. Gossiping as usual, Fitzroy grunted while Pembroke nodded, her pearls clicking. Quite so, Matilda's death shocked us both. Poirot noted their mutual convenience, but set it aside for now. The investigation deepened. Poirot returned to the infirmary accompanied by Hastings and Grayson to question the staff. Miss Hargrove, still shaken, admitted to fetching supplies from the storeroom shortly before the scream, but saw nothing unusual. Dr. Blackwood confirmed the cyanide came from a locked cabinet, accessible to him, Crowe, and Hargrove with keys. Anyone could have taken it, he said, sweating slightly. The cabinet's not guarded. Hastings, ever eager, scoured the grounds for clues, finding what seemed a promising lead. Faint footprints in the mud outside the isolation ward near a sealed window. But Poirot dismissed them. Mon ami, the windows are cemented shut. These prints are a distraction, perhaps from a gardener earlier. A red herring, then, but one that nagged at Hastings' sense of adventure. Back into the manor. Poirot pored over Crowe's ledger, its pages a meticulous record of patients, doses, and schedules. A single entry caught his eye, a notation about irregularities in the infirmary's accounts initialed by Crowe. Did it point to Lord Thornscar's finances, or Blackwood's experiments? He tucked the ledger under his arm, determined to cross-reference it later. The afternoon brought a tense lunch, where conversation danced around the elephant in the room. Julian, picking at his roast, quipped, "Well, at least the infirmary's free of Crowe's iron grip now." Lady Evelyn's fork clattered to her plate. "Julian, have some respect." Lord Thornscar, silent, stared into his wineglass, while Fitzroy muttered about decadent youth. Mrs. Pembroke, ever the gossip, leaned toward Hastings. "They say Matilda kept a secret file, letters, documents. If you ask me, someone wanted those burned." Poirot listened, his silence a magnet for secrets. He noted Lady Evelyn's flushed cheeks, Blackwood's averted gaze, Hargrove's trembling hands. Julian's nonchalance seemed too studied, as if masking something deeper. The room was a chessboard, and Poirot was already calculating moves. As evening approached, he returned to the isolation ward alone, the fog outside now a wall of gray. He stood at the desk, reconstructing the scene. Crow writing, the pen in her hand, the vial, the note. He tested the bolt, sliding it back and forth. It moved smoothly, but a faint scratch on the keyhole caught his eye, a mark so subtle it might be nothing, or everything. "The impossible," he murmured, "is only impossible until it is not." Hastings joined him, breathless from chasing another lead, a missing key from the infirmary's storeroom reported by a maid. Could it be the murderers? They got in somehow. Poirot shook his head. Another distraction, perhaps. The key in the lock was Crow's own, but why the note? Why forgive me? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The locked room was a riddle, its solution hidden in the interplay of motive and opportunity. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together fragments. The bruise on Hargrove's wrist, Blackwood's nervousness, Lord Thornscar's financial strain, Lady Evelyn's cold fury, Julian's sly detachment. Each suspect was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and somewhere in that weave lay the truth. As night fell, the manor's lights flickered, the fog pressing against the windows like an uninvited guest. Poirot retired to his room, his notebook filled with observations. "Hastings," he said, his voice low. "This is no suicide. The murderer has crafted a perfect illusion, but no illusion withstands the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot. The stage was set for a deeper unraveling, the enigma of the locked door only the beginning. Thornscar's secrets were buried deep, but Poirot's gray cells were sharper still." Chapter 4. Gathering storm. The fog that enveloped Thornscar Infirmary clung stubbornly to the estate, as if conspiring to obscure the truth of Nurse Matilda Crow's death. By the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation, the air inside the manor was as heavy with suspicion as the mist outside was with moisture. The Belgian detective, his waxed mustache as precise as his thoughts, moved through the manor with the quiet intensity of a man assembling a puzzle whose pieces were human hearts. Captain Hastings trailed him, his usual cheer dampened by the grim atmosphere. "Poirot," he ventured as they crossed the gravel path to the infirmary. "This locked room business. It's got everyone on edge. Surely we're close to cracking it." Poirot's green eyes glinted under the brim of his hat. "Mon ami, the edge is where we find clarity. But we must tread carefully. The storm gathers and the truth lies in its eye." His cane tapped rhythmically, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The isolation ward's enigma, a bolted door, sealed windows, a cyanide vial, and a cryptic note, had only deepened with yesterday's findings. The scratch on the keyhole, the ledger's hint of financial irregularities, the bruise on Miss Hargrove's wrist. Each was a thread, but the tapestry remained elusive. In the infirmary, Poirot resumed his examination. The cyanide vial, now in Inspector Grayson's custody, had been confirmed as stolen from the storeroom, accessible to Dr. Elias Blackwood, Miss Lydia Hargrove, and Nurse Crow herself. The ledger, which Poirot had borrowed, revealed more, cryptic notations about discrepancies in patient accounts initialed by Crow. Were they tied to Lord Thornscar's rumored embezzlement or something else? Poirot's fingers traced the entries, his mind sifting for connections. Hastings, ever eager, reported a new clue. A war medal belonging to Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, found near the isolation ward's door in the corridor's shadows. Could be significant, Poirot. Fitzroy's a tough old bird. Maybe he had a grudge? Poirot examined the medal, its edges worn from years of pride. A red herring, perhaps, he mused. The colonel claims he lost it days ago. Convenient or planted? Interrogations resumed in the manor's library, where shelves of dusty tomes loomed like silent witnesses. Poirot gathered the 5 suspects, Lord and Lady Thornscar, Dr. Blackwood, Julian Thorne, and Miss Hargrove, along with Fitzroy and Mrs. Violet Pembroke for context. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Poirot began with Colonel Fitzroy, whose ruddy face reddened further at the mention of his medal. "Lost it last week," he growled. "Some fool servant must have dropped it there. I was with Mrs. Pembroke at tea when that scream rang out." Pembroke nodded, her pearls clicking. "Quite so. We were discussing the weather. Dreadful fog." Their alibi held, but Poirot noted their quick agreement, almost rehearsed. Lord Thornscar, seated stiffly, admitted to financial strain. Matilda pressed for more funds, always more. She knew the estate's limits. His voice was weary, his gout-swollen hands clutching his cane. Lady Evelyn, her auburn hair catching the firelight, was sharper. She overstepped, always meddling. But murder? Preposterous. Her eyes darted to Julian, who lounged with a smirk. "Auntie Crow was a bore, but I had no reason to kill her. My debts? Hardly a secret." His nonchalance grated, and Poirot marked it. Too casual, perhaps a mask. Dr. Blackwood, sweating despite the chill, fidgeted with his stethoscope. "Matilda resisted my new treatments, penicillin modern methods. We clashed, but I respected her." His charm faltered under Poirot's gaze. Miss Hargrove last was a trembling wisp. "She was my aunt," she whispered. "Strict, yes, but I didn't hate her. That bruise, it was from a fall, I swear." Her eyes, red-rimmed, pleaded for belief, but Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. Digging deeper, Poirot uncovered fragments of Crow's past. A servant, emboldened by the chaos, whispered of her wartime service as a battlefield nurse, where she'd been accused, though acquitted, of mercy killings. "Some said she eased soldiers' suffering permanently," the maid confided. Dr. Blackwood, her protege during those years, had risen under her tutelage but chafed at her control. Miss Hargrove, it emerged, was Crow's niece, taken in as a child and molded into service. A fact she'd hidden, perhaps from shame or fear. A significant clue surfaced in Crow's desk, a bundle of letters hidden in a false drawer addressed to Lord Thornscar. They hinted at blackmail, referencing a child born out of wedlock and demanding payments to keep it secret. Was Julian that child, or another? Lord Thornscar, confronted, paled. Lies. Matilda was loyal, she'd never... But his denial lacked conviction. Lady Evelyn, overhearing, gripped her fan until her knuckles whitened, her eyes blazing with something like betrayal. Hastings, eager for action, explored the infirmary's basement, chasing a rumor of a hidden passage. He found an old dumbwaiter, sealed since the war, its cables rusted. Could the killer have used it? He asked, breathless. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami, another distraction. The passage is a myth, but the letters, they are real. To stir the pot, Poirot orchestrated a dinner that evening, gathering all in the manor's dining room. The table gleamed with silver, but the mood was leaden. He dropped a calculated hint. Mes amis, I am close to unraveling this mystery. The letters in Nurse Crow's desk, they reveal much. Eyes widened, forks paused. Lady Evelyn accused Julian outright. You ungrateful boy, did you kill her to hide your shame? Julian laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Aunt, you're clutching at straws. I'm no bastard, and Crow's death doesn't change my debts. Colonel Fitzroy pounded the table. Enough of this. Matilda was a hard woman, but fair. This talk of murder, nonsense. Mrs. Pembroke, fanning herself, whispered to Hastings, Those letters. I heard Matilda arguing with Blackwood about them last week. Blackwood, caught off guard, spilled his wine, his face ashen. Gossip. I argued with her about supplies, nothing more. Miss Hargrove, silent until now, burst out, She wasn't cruel to me. She was family. Her outburst drew stares and she fled the room, sobbing. Poirot watched, his mind turning. No confession came, but the seeds of doubt were sown. As night fell, the storm outside broke, rain lashing the manor's windows like a warning. Poirot and Hastings returned to the isolation ward, lit by a single lamp. Poirot examined the desk again, his fingers tracing the blotter. A faint indentation caught his eye, a trace of writing, invisible unless angled just so. He dusted it with pencil lead, revealing fragments. Trust, payment, silence. Was it a draft of the blackmail letters or something else? Hastings, restless, reported another false lead, a servant's claim of a stranger seen near the estate days ago. Could be an outsider, Poirot. But Poirot dismissed it. No, the killer is here. The letters, the poison, the locked door, all point inward. Then a new twist. A scream echoed from the manor, not the infirmary. Rushing back, they found Mrs. Pembroke in hysterics, claiming a shadow had passed her window. It was death itself, she wailed, clutching her pearls. Investigation revealed nothing, a nightmare perhaps, or another distraction. But Poirot's brow furrowed. The killer grows bold or desperate, he said. They wish to muddy the waters. The night deepened, the storm's roar a backdrop to Thornscar's unease. Poirot sat in his room, his notebook open, sketching a web of motives: Lord Thornscar's money, Lady Evelyn's jealousy, Blackwood's rivalry, Julian's inheritance, Hargrove's pain. The red herrings, metal footprints, dumbwaiter, were piling up, each a deliberate misdirection. The letters pointed to blackmail, but who was the target? And how had the killer breached the locked room? Hastings, Poirot said, closing his notebook. We are in a storm of lies. But the truth, it is like lightning. It will strike, and soon. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. The enigma of Nurse Crow's death was no longer just a puzzle. It was a challenge to his intellect, and Hercule Poirot was not one to be outwitted. The rain continued to fall, washing away the fog but not the secrets of Thornscar. The investigation was far from over, and the next move belonged to the killer, or to Poirot. Chapter 5. Hidden Alliances. The storm that battered Thornscar Infirmary raged into its second night, rain drumming against the manor's ancient, windows as if demanding entry. Inside, the atmosphere was no less turbulent, the air thick with suspicion and secrets. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the chaos around him, sat in the manor's library, his notebook open, his little gray cells working at a fever pitch. The death of Nurse Matilda Crow in the locked isolation ward, a bolted door, a cyanide vial, a cryptic note, had woven a web of motives and misdirection. Captain Hastings, pacing by the fire, was visibly agitated. Poirot, this case is a tangle. Blackmail letters, missing medals, footprints that lead nowhere. How do we make sense of it all? Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, gleamed in the lamplight. Mon ami, the tangle is deliberate. The killer weaves a net of confusion, but every knot can be undone with logic. His cane rested against his chair, a silent partner in his deductions. The investigation had reached a critical juncture. Clues were mounting, but so were complications, and the truth remained just out of reach. The morning began with a deeper dive into the suspect's connections. Poirot, accompanied by Inspector Grayson and Hastings, returned to the infirmary to re-examine Nurse Crow's desk. The faint indentations on the blotter, trust, payment, silence, suggested a draft of the blackmail letters found hidden in the drawer, but a new discovery emerged. A tiny scrap of paper caught in the desk's seam bearing a single word in Crow's hand. Alliance. Poirot's brow furrowed. An alliance perhaps between our matron and another? Or a warning? Hastings, ever eager, suggested a search of the suspect's rooms, and Grayson secured Lord Thornscar's reluctant permission. In Dr. Elias Blackwood's quarters, they found a locked journal which the doctor, flustered, opened under pressure. Its pages detailed experimental treatments, unorthodox, possibly illegal, administered to patients without Crow's knowledge. "She'd have sacked me if she knew," Blackwood admitted, his charm cracking. "But I never harmed her." Poirot noted his sweat, his trembling hands. A motive, certainly, but was it enough? Miss Lydia Hargrove's room yielded a different clue, a locket hidden beneath her pillow containing a photograph of a young Matilda Crow with a child, Lydia herself perhaps. "She raised me," Hargrove confessed tearfully when confronted. "After my parents died, she was all I had. But she was so strict. I resented her, but I didn't kill her." Her bruise, she insisted again, was from a fall, though her eyes avoided Poirot's. Julian Thorne's room was a chaos of sketches, many disturbingly vivid. One depicted a woman resembling Crow, her face contorted in death, poison vial in hand. "Artistic fancy," Julian drawled, lounging on his bed. "I draw what I feel, doesn't mean I did it." But his smirk faltered under Poirot's scrutiny, and a search revealed a gambling IOU for a staggering sum, signed to a London creditor. Crow's blackmail letters had mentioned debts. Could she have threatened to expose him, jeopardizing his inheritance? Lord and Lady Thornscar's suite offered little: financial ledgers confirming the estate's dire straits, and a locked jewelry box empty save for a few trinkets. Lady Evelyn, when questioned, flushed. "My jewels? Misplaced, perhaps. Stolen. Nonsense." But her agitation suggested more, and Poirot wondered if Crow's letters had referenced theft, or worse. A surprising twist emerged from the servants. A maid, trembling, revealed she'd seen Dr. Blackwood and Miss Hargrove together in the infirmary's garden late at night, weeks before the murder. Their voices were low, intimate. "Lovers?" Hastings whispered, shocked. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Or conspirators, mon ami?" Confronted, Blackwood admitted to a romance with Hargrove. "We kept it secret. Matilda would have disapproved. But we planned to leave, start anew. No murder." Hargrove, sobbing, corroborated. "We just wanted freedom." Their alibi, together in the garden at the time of the scream, held. But Poirot sensed half-truths. Another red herring surfaced. A rumor that Crow's tea, served daily in her office, had been poisoned. But tests by Grayson's chemist found no trace in the pot or cup. "A distraction," Poirot muttered. "The cyanide was in the vial, not the tea." Yet the rumor stirred panic, with Mrs. Violet Pembroke refusing her afternoon tea, clutching her pearls. "Poison everywhere," she wailed, her hypochondria in full bloom. Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, meanwhile, revealed a new angle. Over sherry in the drawing room, he confided to Hastings. Crow was no saint. During the war, she was suspected of hastening deaths. Mercy, they called it. Never proved. His gruff tone held a hint of fear. Was he deflecting suspicion or exposing a truth? Poirot filed it away, noting Fitzroy's medal, allegedly lost, found near the ward, as a potential plant. The day's tension peaked at dinner, orchestrated by Poirot to unsettle the suspects. The dining room, lit by flickering candles, felt like a stage for confrontation. Poirot spoke deliberately. "The letters suggest Nurse Crow knew secrets that threatened someone here. Secrets of birth, debt, or betrayal." Eyes darted. Lord Thornscar's to his wife, Lady Evelyn's to Julian, Blackwood's to Hargrove. Julian broke the silence with a laugh. "You're fishing, Poirot. Crow was a busybody, nothing more." But Lady Evelyn snapped. "Enough, Julian. If anyone had reason to silence her, it's you. Your debts, your disgrace." Julian's face darkened, but he retorted, "And what of your precious jewels, Aunt? Missing, are they? Maybe you sold them to keep this crumbling pile afloat. Lord Thornscar slammed his fist on the table. Silence, both of you! Mrs. Pembroke, fanning herself, whispered to Hastings. I saw Matilda with a locked box, documents maybe. She guarded it like gold. Fitzroy grunted. She guarded everything. Ran this place like a prison. Blackwood, pale, said little, while Hargrove excused herself, claiming a headache. Poirot watched, his mind mapping alliances and animosities. A critical complication arose that evening, a near accident in the infirmary. A patient's medication, prepared by Hargrove, was found to be misdosed, potentially lethal had Blackwood not caught it. A mistake, Hargrove insisted, tearful. I was distracted. But Poirot wondered, sabotage or another red herring to discredit her? Blackwood's quick intervention raised questions. Was he protecting his lover or covering his own tracks? The storm's intensity mirrored the case's complexity. Poirot, back in the isolation ward, focused on the method. The cyanide vial was a puzzle, accessible to all yet too obvious. He re-examined the desk, noting the pen's position, the blotter's indentations. A sudden insight struck. The pen's nib was slightly bent, as if pressed too hard. Could the poison have been administered not by drinking but through contact? A theory formed. A hidden needle laced with cyanide, embedded in the desk's blotter, triggered when Crow wrote her note. The idea was audacious, ingenious, worthy of a cunning mind. But who? Blackwood with his medical knowledge, Hargrove driven by years of resentment, Julian protecting his future, the Thornscars guarding their legacy? Poirot tested the theory, pressing the blotter lightly with a gloved finger. Nothing. Yet the idea persisted, a spark in the dark. Hastings, reporting another lead, found a groundskeeper who claimed to have seen a light in the isolation ward before the scream. Could have been a lantern, the man said. Or just my eyes. Another false trail, Poirot suspected, but he noted it. The killer was clever, scattering distractions like leaves in the wind. As midnight approached, Poirot stood at his window, the storm's roar a counterpoint to his thoughts. Hastings, he said, we are close yet far. The alliance between whom? The needle, if it exists, is the key. And the note, forgive me, was it her choice or forced? Hastings, rubbing his eyes, sighed. It's like chasing ghosts, Poirot. But you'll get them, won't you? Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. The ghosts of Thornscar cannot hide forever. The truth, it waits in the shadows, and I shall find it. The manor slept uneasily, the storm a restless guardian. The investigation had turned a corner, but the path ahead was fraught with twists. The killer, Poirot knew, was watching, waiting for his next move. And he was ready. Chapter 6. Fractured Alibis. The storm that had battered Thornscar Infirmary for 2 days began to wane, leaving behind a sky bruised with clouds and a manor steeped in unease. The death of Nurse Matilda Crow in the locked isolation. Ward, a cyanide vial, a bolted door, a note reading, "Forgive me," had cast a shadow over the estate, and Hercule Poirot's investigation was peeling back layers of deception. The Belgian detective, his meticulous appearance unshaken by the chaos, sat in the manor's library, his notebook a map of motives and misdirection. Captain Hastings, his loyal companion, hovered nearby, his face a mix of frustration and awe. Poirot, we've got blackmail letters, a hidden needle, lovers' secrets, yet the killer's still a step ahead. How do you stay so calm? Poirot's green eyes flickered with quiet intensity. Mon ami, the calm is where the truth resides. The killer's steps, they leave echoes. Alibis that crack, clues that whisper. We listen, and we learn. His cane rested against the armchair, a silent sentinel as his gray cells churned through the evidence. The blackmail letters hinting at Lord Thornscar's secrets. The bruise on Miss Hargrove's wrist, Dr. Blackwood's illicit experiments, Julian Thorne's gambling debts, and the ingenious possibility of a poisoned needle in the desk blotter. The morning began with a renewed scrutiny of alibis. Poirot summoned the suspects to the drawing room where the fire's glow did little to warm the chilled atmosphere. Colonel Bertram Fitzroy and Mrs. Violet Pembroke, whose tea-time alibi had seemed solid, faced closer questioning. Fitzroy, his ruddy face bristling with indignation, admitted to a lapse. "All right, I stepped out briefly. Needed air. Saw Crow through the infirmary window working late. Didn't think much of it." His gruff admission raised eyebrows. Had he spied on her, or worse? Pembroke, flustered, adjusted her pearls. "I was alone for a moment, yes, but only to fetch my shawl. We were together otherwise." Their alibi, once airtight, now had fissures. Poirot turned to Dr. Elias Blackwood and Miss Lydia Hargrove, whose garden rendezvous placed them together at the time of the scream. But a servant's testimony, overheard by Hastings, suggested Blackwood had slipped back to the infirmary briefly, claiming to check supplies. "A routine task," Blackwood insisted, his stethoscope twisting in his hands. "Matilda was alive when I left," Hargrove, pale, corroborated. "We were together, mostly." Her hesitation was a crack in their story, and Poirot's gaze lingered, probing. Julian Thorne, lounging with his usual smirk, offered little. His sketch of Crow's death found in his room was dismissed as artistic license. But Poirot pressed, "Monsieur, your debts were known to Nurse Crow. Did she threaten to expose you?" Julian's green eyes flashed. "She nagged, sure. But kill her? Too much effort." His flippancy rang hollow, and Poirot noted a new clue. A scrap of paper in Julian's sketchbook bearing the same ink as Crow's note. Coincidence or evidence? Lord and Lady Thornscar, questioned separately, revealed more. Lord Thornscar, his gout-ridden hands trembling, admitted Crow had confronted him about irregularities in the trust fund. She suspected mismanagement, not theft, he insisted, but his eyes avoided Poirot's. Lady Evelyn, her auburn hair tightly pinned, was colder. Matilda overreached. She thought herself the estate's conscience. When pressed about her missing jewels, she snapped, "Misplaced, not stolen." Yet her agitation suggested a deeper fear, perhaps tied to the blackmail letter's hint of a bastard child. A bombshell dropped when Poirot uncovered a hidden past. Blackwood, in a tense confrontation, admitted to an affair with Crow years ago during their wartime service. "It ended badly," he confessed, his charm crumbling. "She held it over me, threatened to tell the board, but I didn't kill her." The revelation recast his motive, not just professional rivalry, but personal betrayal. Hargrove, hearing this, gasped. "You never told me," she whispered, her trust in her lover visibly shaken. The red herring of Fitzroy's war medal found near the ward was resolved. A servant confessed to finding it days earlier and dropping it in panic after the scream. "Thought it'd look suspicious," the boy mumbled. Poirot nodded, dismissing another distraction, but the false leads were piling up, each a deliberate move by the killer. The investigation took a dangerous turn that evening. As the manor's lights flickered under the storm's lingering strain, Poirot retired to his room, only to find his cocoa, delivered by a maid, laced with a bitter undertone. He paused, sniffing the cup, and sent it to Grayson's chemist. The result? A trace of cyanide, diluted but deadly. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, "the killer strikes again, and at me." Hastings, horrified, exclaimed, "They're desperate, Poirot. You're too close." The attempt shifted the case's tone. Poirot gathered the household, his voice steely. "Someone here wishes to silence the truth, but Hercule Poirot does not falter." Eyes darted. Blackwood's to the floor, Julian's to the ceiling, Hargrove's to Blackwood. Lord Thornscar clutched his cane while Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut. The room was a powder keg and Poirot held the match. Returning to the isolation ward, Poirot tested his needle theory. The desk blotter, under closer scrutiny, revealed a tiny puncture, barely visible. Using a magnifying glass, he found a hair-thin needle embedded in the wood beneath, its tip stained with a residue that matched the cyanide's scent. "Ingenious," he whispered. "Crow wrote her note, pressed the blotter, and the needle delivered death." But the mechanism required precision. Medical knowledge, perhaps, pointing to Blackwood or Hargrove. Or was it a frame? A new clue emerged. A groundskeeper, questioned by Grayson, recalled hearing a faint click in the ward before the scream, like a clock winding. "Thought it was machinery," he said. Poirot's mind raced. A timed device? The needle could have been spring-loaded, triggered by pressure. But who had the skill to craft such a trap? Blackwood with his experiments, Julian with his artist's dexterity. Hargrove's earlier claim about her bruise unraveled further. A maid, emboldened, whispered to Hastings that she'd seen Crow grab Hargrove's wrist days before during a heated argument. "She was scolding her about carelessness," the maid said. Hargrove, confronted, broke down. "Yes, she grabbed me. She was furious about a missing vial, not cyanide, morphine. I didn't steal it." Her tears seemed genuine, but Poirot wondered, was she a victim or a clever actress? The storm's aftermath left the grounds muddy, and Hastings, ever the sleuth, found fresh footprints near the infirmary. Not the earlier red herring, but new, leading to a tool shed. Inside, they found a discarded glove stained with ink matching Crow's note. "The killer's mistake," Hastings crowed. Poirot, cautious, noted its size. Too large for Hargrove, too small for Fitzroy. Blackwood or Julian? Or another plant? As night fell, Poirot sat with Hastings, piecing together the fractured alibis. Fitzroy's brief absence, Blackwood's infirmary visit, Hargrove's wavering story, each cracked under scrutiny. The blackmail letters tied all to Crow's secrets: Lord Thornscar's finances, Lady Evelyn's past, Blackwood's affair, Julian's debts, Hargrove's resentment. The needle, if real, was the key, but its creator remained elusive. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "this feels personal. Someone hated Crow enough to craft this trap." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "Oui, mon ami. Hate or fear. The alliance, perhaps it was not Crow's but the killer's, to silence her forever." The manor slept fitfully, its corridors echoing with the storm's last gasps. Poirot's notebook grew dense with connections, but one question burned. Who had set the needle and why? The truth was close, a shadow in the fog, and Poirot's gray cells were poised to strike. Chapter 7. Unveiling Secrets. The storm that had gripped Thornscar Infirmary for days had finally retreated, leaving a sky of broken clouds and a manor steeped in the aftermath of suspicion. The death of Nurse Matilda Crow in the locked isolation ward, a cyanide-laced needle, a bolted door, a note reading "Forgive me," had woven a tapestry of deceit, and Hercule Poirot stood on the cusp of unraveling it. The Belgian detective, his waxed mustache as precise as his logic, gathered the residents in the manor's grand drawing room, where the fire's glow cast long shadows on the oak-paneled walls. Captain Hastings, at his side, whispered, "Poirot, this is it, isn't it? You've got the killer cornered." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. "Mon ami, the truth is like a star, hidden by clouds but always there. Tonight we clear the sky." His cane tapped softly, a rhythm to his thoughts as he surveyed the assembled: Lord and Lady Thornscar, Dr. Elias Blackwood, Miss Lydia Hargrove, Mr. Julian Thorne, Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, and Mrs. Violet Pembroke. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, notebook in hand, his deference to Poirot evident. The air was thick with anticipation, each face a mask of fear, defiance, or curiosity. Poirot began, his voice measured, carrying the weight of revelation. Mesdames et messieurs, the death of Nurse Matilda Crowe was no suicide, but a murder most cunning. A locked room, a poisoned needle, a note forced by a killer's hand. These were not accidents, but a design. Let us unravel it step by step. He paced slowly, his small frame commanding the room. First, the method. The isolation ward was bolted from within, the key in the lock, the windows sealed. Yet a needle hidden in the desk blotter delivered cyanide through the skin as Nurse Crowe wrote her note. A click, heard by a groundskeeper, suggests a spring mechanism triggered by pressure. This required precision, knowledge, perhaps medical, perhaps mechanical. Eyes darted to Blackwood, whose hands tightened on his stethoscope. Poirot continued. The note, forgive me, was in her hand, but the ink matched a pen in Mr. Thorne's room, and the phrasing was too vague for a woman of Crowe's clarity. It was coerced, written under duress, the needle ensuring her silence. Julian shifted, his smirk fading. The bolt, you see, was tampered. A string, threaded through the keyhole, pulled it shut after the killer left, creating the illusion of a locked room. Gasps rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn's fan snapped shut. Impossible, she said. Poirot raised a hand. Not impossible, madame. Ingenious, but not infallible. He turned to motives, his voice sharpening. Nurse Crowe was a keeper of secrets, her ledger and letters a catalogue of sins. Each of you had reason to fear her. He listed them, his words like darts. Lord Reginald Thornscar. Your estate bleeds money, monsieur. Crowe's notations hinted at embezzlement from your brother's trust. Exposure would ruin you. Lord Thornscar's face paled, his cane trembling. I managed, not stole. Lady Evelyn Thornscar. Letters spoke of a child born out of wedlock, perhaps tied to a past affair. Crowe's knowledge threatened your honor. Lady Evelyn's eyes blazed. Lies. I'd never stoop to murder. Dr. Elias Blackwood. Your experiments, illegal drugs on patients, were discovered by Crowe. She threatened to report you, end your career. Blackwood's charm crumbled. I healed, not harmed. Mr. Julian Thorne. Your gambling debts, documented by Crowe, risked disinheritance. Her letters could have sealed your ruin. Julian's green eyes narrowed. I'm no killer, Poirot. Miss Lydia Hargrove. As Crowe's niece, you endured her cruelty. The bruise on your wrist from her grip speaks of resentment. Did it boil to revenge? Hargrove sobbed. No, she was family. Colonel Fitzroy and Mrs. Pembroke, Poirot noted, were cleared. Their fractured alibi still placed them at tea far from the ward. But the others formed a web of motives, each thread taut with desperation. Poirot paused, letting the tension build. But motives alone do not a murderer make. We must look to opportunity and evidence. He produced the stained glove from the tool shed, its ink matching Crowe's note. This glove, too large for Mademoiselle Hargrove, too small for Colonel Fitzroy, points to another. He held up a vial of residue tested by Grayson's chemist. Cyanide traces found on gloves in Dr. Blackwood's room, hidden in a locked drawer. Blackwood leapt to his feet, face ashen. Lies. I was framed. But Poirot's voice cut through. You, monsieur, had the skill to craft the needle, the access to cyanide, the motive to silence Crowe's threats. Your affair with her years ago gave her power over you. Your experiments, morphine overdoses unreported, were her leverage. You rigged the desk, forced her to write, and left, pulling the bolt with a string. The room erupted. Hargrove gasped. Elias, no! Julian laughed bitterly. Clever doctor caught at last. Lord Thornscar clutched his chest while Lady Evelyn stared, her face a mask of shock. Fitzroy muttered, knew he was trouble. Pembroke's pearls clicked as she fanned herself furiously. Blackwood lunged, not for Poirot but for the door. Grayson, quick for his bulk, tackled him, pinning him to the floor. "You've no proof," Blackwood shouted, struggling. Poirot held up the journal from Blackwood's room, its pages detailing his experiments. "This, monsieur, is your confession, dates, doses, patients, all known to Crow, and this," he produced a tiny spring found in the desk's underside, "is the mechanism that killed her." Blackwood's fight drained away, his shoulders slumping. "She was going to ruin me," he whispered. "Years of work, my reputation gone. I didn't mean for it to go this far." His voice broke, a mix of defiance and despair. "She wrote the note herself under my threat, the needle." It was quick. Hargrove collapsed, sobbing. Her love for Blackwood shattered. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. "Monsieur, you chose ambition over humanity. The little gray cells, they see all." The room fell silent, the weight of truth settling like dust. Grayson cuffed Blackwood, who was led away, his head bowed. Lord Thornscar spoke, his voice hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, you've saved us from further ruin." Lady Evelyn, composed again, nodded. "A tragedy, but justice." Julian, for once without a quip, stared at the fire, his future uncertain. Hargrove, supported by a maid, left quietly, her tears unending. Hastings, awestruck, clapped Poirot's shoulder. "By Jove, you did it! That needle business, brilliant!" Poirot waved him off. "Not brilliance, mon ami, but order and method. The killer's design was clever, but no match for logic." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, reviewing loose ends. The blackmail letters, he deduced, were Crow's attempt to control, not extort, her way of maintaining power. The missing jewels, Lady Evelyn later admitted, were sold to cover debts, not stolen. Fitzroy's medal, Pembroke's scream, red herrings planted or accidental to cloud the truth. The footprints, the dumbwaiter, the stranger. All distractions now irrelevant. The manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Poirot stood by the window, the night sky clearing to reveal stars. "Hastings," he said softly, "the human heart is a locked room, too. But with care it can be opened." The investigation was all but concluded, but Thornscar's wounds would linger. Justice had been served, yet the cost was etched in every face. Poirot closed his notebook, the case nearly complete, but his gray cells remained alert, ready for any final echo of the storm. Chapter 8. The Poisoned Pen. The manor of Thornscar Infirmary stood quiet under a sky finally free of storm clouds, but the stillness was deceptive, a hush before the final unmasking of truth. Hercule Poirot's revelation in the drawing room had shaken the household. Dr. Elias Blackwood, the charming physician, stood accused of murdering Nurse Matilda Crow, his cunning trap of a cyanide-laced needle in the locked isolation ward exposed. Yet the Belgian detective, his waxed mustache as sharp as his intellect, knew the case was not fully closed. Loose ends lingered, and Poirot's gray cells demanded absolute clarity. Captain Hastings, pacing the library where they now convened, was alight with excitement. "Poirot, you've done it! Blackwood's confession, caught red-handed. But how did you know it was him?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his small frame radiating quiet authority. "Mon ami, the truth is a mosaic built piece by piece. The killer's design was clever, but no design withstands the order and method of Hercule Poirot." His cane rested against the armchair, a silent partner as he prepared to solidify the case, ensuring no doubt remained before Inspector Grayson took Blackwood away. The morning after the drawing-room confrontation, the manor buzzed with a mix of relief and unease. Blackwood, confined to a locked room under Grayson's watch, awaited transport to the local magistrate. The other residents, Lord and Lady Thornscar, Miss Lydia Hargrove, Mr. Julian Thorne, Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, and Mrs. Violet Pembroke, gathered in the dining room for breakfast, their faces etched with the strain of the past days. Poirot, invited to join them, declined, preferring to review his evidence in solitude. "We must ensure, Hastings, that every thread is tied," he said, opening his notebook. "The killer's confession is but the frame. The details paint the picture." Poirot began by revisiting the method, reconstructing the murder with clinical precision. The isolation ward, with its bolted door and sealed windows, had been a stage for deception. The needle, hidden in the desk's blotter, was no ordinary trap. It was a spring-loaded mechanism, its cyanide-coated tip triggered by the pressure of Crow writing her note. The click heard by the groundskeeper, Poirot explained to Hastings, was the spring engaging, a sound masked by the storm. The killer forced her to write "Forgive me," then left, using a string through the keyhole to pull the bolt shut, a classic trick but executed with finesse. The evidence against Blackwood was damning. The glove from the tool shed, stained with ink matching Crow's note, fit his hand. The journal from his room detailed illegal experiments, morphine overdoses administered to patients hidden from Crow's scrutiny. "She discovered this," Poirot said, tapping the journal. "Her ledger noted irregularities, not just in funds but in treatments. She threatened to expose him, to ruin his career. The cyanide residue on gloves hidden in his drawer sealed his guilt, confirmed by Grayson's chemist. But Poirot sought more, the why behind the how. Blackwood's past affair with Crow, revealed in the previous chapter, added a personal layer. She held power over him, Poirot mused, not just professionally but emotionally. Her knowledge of his past, combined with her discovery of his experiments, was a double threat. He acted to protect his future and his pride. Hastings, nodding, raised a question. "But what about the blackmail letters? Were they all about Blackwood?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. Crow's letters were a web ensnaring many. Lord Thornscar's embezzlement, Lady Evelyn's rumored affair, Julian's debts, Hargrove's theft of morphine, they were all her targets. But only Blackwood acted." To confirm, Poirot summoned Blackwood for a final interrogation, held in the infirmary's office under Grayson's guard. The doctor, his charm replaced by a haggard defiance, sat slumped, his hands cuffed. "You've won, Poirot," he said bitterly. "What more do you want?" Poirot's voice was calm but unrelenting. "The truth, monsieur, in full. How did you craft the needle? When did you plan her death?" Blackwood's eyes flickered, then fell. "It was weeks in the making," he admitted. "I found an old surgical tool in the infirmary's stores, a spring-loaded lancet from the war. I modified it, coated the tip with cyanide from the stock. She trusted me, let me into the ward that night. I told her to write the note, said it was for a patient record. She didn't suspect until the needle pricked her." His voice broke. "It was quick. I didn't want her to suffer." He described the string, trick. A thin cord threaded through the keyhole, pulled from outside to slide the bolt. "I practiced it for days," he said. "The fog hid my movements." The glove, he claimed, was an oversight, dropped in haste as he fled to the tool shed to discard tools. "I thought I'd covered everything," he whispered, "but you saw through it." Poirot nodded, satisfied. "Your mistake, monsieur, was underestimating the human mind. The glove, the journal, the needle, they spoke louder than your lies." Back in the manor, Poirot addressed the loose ends. The blackmail letters, he explained to Hastings, were Crow's attempt to control, not extort. She was a woman of power, using secrets to maintain her authority. The letters about a child were likely a fabrication to pressure Lord Thornscar, not proof of Julian's illegitimacy. Lady Evelyn's missing jewels, she confessed tearfully, were sold to cover debts, not stolen. A secret Crow had uncovered but not yet acted upon. Miss Hargrove's bruise, Poirot confirmed, was indeed from Crow's grip, as the maid had witnessed. But Mademoiselle Hargrove was no killer, he said. Her love for Blackwood blinded her to his guilt, but she is innocent. Hargrove, devastated, had withdrawn, her trust shattered. Julian's sketch of Crow's death was, as he claimed, artistic fancy, though his debts remained a shadow over his future. Colonel Fitzroy's medal and Mrs. Pembroke's scream were clarified as distractions. Fitzroy's carelessness, Pembroke's nerves, the footprints, the dumbwaiter, the rumored stranger, all red herrings, either accidental or planted by Blackwood to confuse. He was clever, Poirot admitted, but not clever enough. The Manor's residents gathered once more, this time in the parlor, as Grayson prepared to escort Blackwood to the magistrate. Lord Thornscar, his gaunt face softened by relief, thanked Poirot. "You've saved us from further scandal, monsieur." Lady Evelyn, her composure restored, nodded. "A grim truth, but necessary." Julian, uncharacteristically subdued, offered a curt, "Well done, Poirot." Fitzroy grunted approval, while Pembroke, clutching her pearls, whispered, "I knew he was no good." Hargrove, absent, sent a note via a maid. "I cannot face him. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot." Her heartbreak was palpable, but Poirot's expression remained impassive. He dealt in truth, not sentiment. As Grayson led Blackwood away, the doctor cast a final glance at the Manor, his eyes hollow. "I only wanted to protect my work," he said almost to himself. The door closed and Thornscar exhaled as if a weight had lifted. Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, the fire now low. "By Jove, Poirot," Hastings said, "that needle trick, diabolical. How did you spot it?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The blotter, mon ami. Its puncture was too precise for accident. From there the pieces fell into place. Glove, journal, string. The killer's mind is a machine, but mine is sharper." He closed his notebook. The case's mosaic complete. The Manor, though scarred, would heal. The fog had lifted, both literal and figurative, revealing a truth as stark as the Devon moors. "Justice," Poirot said softly, "is not vengeance, but balance. Thornscar is balanced once more." Hastings clapped his shoulder. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Now a brandy to celebrate?" Poirot's smile widened. "Perhaps, mon ami, but first we rest. The grey cells, they have earned it." The Manor settled into a fragile peace, its secrets laid bare. The case of the Sinister Matron was closed, but its echoes would linger, a reminder of the darkness that lurks behind locked doors. Chapter 9. Echoes of Justice. The dawn broke over Thornscar Infirmary with a clarity that seemed to wash away the last vestiges of the storm, both meteorological and moral, that had gripped the estate. The Manor, its grey stone softened by the morning light, stood as a silent witness to the resolution of Nurse Matilda Crow's murder. A locked room, a cyanide-laced needle, a note of forced confession. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit and waxed mustache as precise as ever, stood in the Manor's library, his notebook closed but his mind still tracing the echoes of the case. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, leaned against a bookshelf, his face a mix of relief and wonder. "By Jove, Poirot, you've done it again. Blackwood's confession, that needle trap, it's all tied up neatly. Thornscar can breathe again, eh?" Poirot's green eyes flickered with a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the weight of human frailty he had uncovered. "Mon ami, justice is served, but the heart of Thornscar bears scars. The truth, it heals, but it also leaves marks." His cane rested against the armchair, a silent partner as he prepared to tie up the final threads of the mystery, ensuring no shadow of doubt remained. The morning after Dr. Elias Blackwood's arrest, the manor stirred with a fragile sense of normalcy. Inspector Grayson had taken Blackwood to the magistrate in the nearby town of Exeter, the doctor's haggard figure a stark contrast to the charming physician who had once commanded respect. The residents, Lord and Lady Thornscar, Miss Lydia Hargrove, Mr. Julian Thorne, Colonel Bertram Fitzroy, and Mrs. Violet Pembroke, gathered in the dining room for a subdued breakfast, their conversation muted, their eyes avoiding the empty chair where Crow's presence had once loomed. Poirot, invited to join, chose instead to meet with Lord Thornscar privately in the study, a room lined with portraits of stern ancestors. The gaunt lord, his gout-swollen hands clutching a cane, looked older than his 60 years. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "your work has saved this estate from ruin, not just financial but moral. Blackwood's treachery. I never suspected." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, the treachery was hidden but not invisible. Nurse Crow's death was a spark in a powder keg of secrets. Your trust fund, it was strained, yes, but not by theft, only mismanagement." The blackmail letters, Poirot explained, were Crow's attempt to assert control, not extort. She used your fear of scandal to ensure her authority over the infirmary. The child mentioned in her letters was likely a fabrication, a lever to pressure you. Lord Thornscar exhaled, relief softening his features. "Then Julian is truly my nephew?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, monsieur. No evidence suggests otherwise. Your brother's legacy is safe." The lord's gratitude was palpable, and he promised to review the estate's finances, vowing to keep the infirmary running in Crow's memory, albeit with reforms. Lady Evelyn, met later in the parlor, was a study in restored composure. Her auburn hair gleamed under her silk scarf, but her sharp eyes betrayed lingering unease. "Monsieur Poirot, you've lifted a shadow from us," she said, her voice steady. "My jewels. I sold them, as you suspected, to cover debts. Matilda knew, but she never spoke of it. I misjudged her." Poirot's expression softened. "Madame, she was a woman of power, but not of malice. Her letters were a tool, not a weapon. Your honor remains intact." Lady Evelyn nodded, a rare vulnerability in her posture. "Thornscar will endure," she said almost to herself, "but we must change." Miss Hargrove, still reeling from Blackwood's betrayal, remained in her room tended by a maid. Poirot visited her briefly, finding her pale but resolute. "I loved him," she whispered, clutching the locket with Crow's photograph. "But I see now. He used me." The bruise on her wrist, Poirot confirmed, was indeed from Crow's grip, a moment of anger over a missing morphine vial. "You are free now, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Your aunt's shadow is gone, and you may choose your path." Hargrove's tears fell, but she nodded, a spark of strength returning. Julian Thorne, encountered in the garden, was uncharacteristically subdued. His green eyes, usually sharp with mischief, were clouded. "You've saved my neck, Poirot," he said, tossing a pebble into a fountain. "Crow's letters could have ruined me. Those debts are real enough. But I'll reform, I swear. No more cards." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Monsieur, the artist in you is restless but honest. Use it wisely." Julian's faint smile suggested a turning point, though Poirot knew old habits died hard. Colonel Fitzroy and Mrs. Pembroke, cleared of suspicion, offered gruff thanks in the conservatory. Fitzroy, polishing his recovered war medal, grunted, "Knew Blackwood was slippery." "Good work, Poirot." Pembroke, her pearls clicking, added, "I told you she had secrets, didn't I? But murder, oh my nerves." Poirot smiled politely, noting their relief was tinged with self-interest. Their alibis, though fractured, had held. The final loose ends were addressed in a meeting with Inspector Grayson, who returned to confirm Blackwood's formal charge. The glove, the journal, the needle's spring mechanism, all were catalogued as evidence. The string trick, Poirot explained, was a simple but effective ruse. A thin cord, pulled through the keyhole, had slid the bolt after Blackwood's exit, creating the locked room illusion. The cyanide stolen from the infirmary stores was traced to Blackwood's access as chief physician. The red herrings, Fitzroy's medal, the footprints, the dumbwaiter, Pembroke's scream, were clarified as distractions, some accidental, some planted. Blackwood was meticulous, Poirot told Grayson. But his glove was his undoing. He discarded it in haste, believing the tool shed safe. The ink-stained scrap in Julian's sketchbook, Poirot added, was a coincidence. Crow's pen had been used by many, its ink common. As noon approached, Poirot and Hastings walked the grounds, the air crisp with autumn's bite. The infirmary, once Crow's domain, stood quieter now, its staff preparing for a new matron. "What a place, Poirot," Hastings said, puffing his pipe. "All those secrets locked away like that room. You saw through it all." Poirot's smile was faint. "The human heart, mon ami, is the true locked room. Greed, fear, love, they bolt the truth inside. But with method we find the key." He paused by the oak-lined path, his gaze distant. Blackwood sought to protect his ambition, but he lost his soul. Crow, for all her faults, sought order. Both paid a price. The manor's residents began to heal, their futures uncertain but unburdened. Lord and Lady Thornscar vowed to reconcile, their marriage strained but not broken. Julian sketched in the garden, his lines softer, less chaotic. Hargrove, though heartbroken, spoke of training as a nurse elsewhere, free from Thornscar's shadow. Fitzroy and Pembroke resumed their routine, their gossip now tempered by humility. Poirot, preparing to depart, packed his small case with care. "Hastings," he said, "Thornscar is a lesson. The past binds us, but the truth sets us free. We leave this place better than we found it." Hastings grinned. "And you, Poirot, are a marvel, another case for the books." As they awaited their car to Exeter, Poirot stood at the manor's gate, the infirmary a somber silhouette against the moors. The echoes of justice rang clear, but he knew Thornscar would carry its scars. The case of the Sinister Matron was closed, its secrets laid bare, and Hercule Poirot's gray cells rested, for now. Chapter 10. Farewell to Thornscar. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Thornscar Infirmary, its rays piercing the last wisps of fog that had clung to the Devon estate like a shroud. The manor, with its weathered stone and ivy-clad walls, stood as a nullum, testament to endurance, its scars softened by the promise of renewal. The murder of Nurse Matilda Crow, her death by a cyanide-laced needle in a locked room orchestrated by Dr. Elias Blackwood, had been laid bare by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic. Now, as the Belgian detective prepared to depart, the estate seemed to exhale, its secrets exposed, its balance restored. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful companion, stood by Poirot's side on the gravel drive, his suitcase packed, his pipe puffing gently. "Well, Poirot, another triumph for the gray cells? Thornscar's a different place now, isn't it?" Poirot, his waxed mustache gleaming, adjusted his hat with a precise flick. "Mon ami, it is the same place, but seen in truth. The shadows are gone, and the heart of Thornscar beats anew." His green eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the manor, the infirmary, the oak-lined path where secrets had once whispered. His cane tapped softly, a rhythm of closure as he reflected on the case that had tested his intellect and revealed the frailties of those within these walls. The day began with farewells, each tinged with the weight of the past week's revelations. Lord Reginald Thornscar, his gaunt frame less burdened, met Poirot in the manor's grand hall. His gout-swollen hands gripped a cane, but his voice carried a new resolve. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us a chance to rebuild. The infirmary will continue, but with transparency, no more secrets." He paused, his eyes meeting Poirot's. "I've engaged an accountant to audit the trust. Crow's notations, they were right. I mismanaged, but I'll make it right." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, the truth is a bitter medicine, but it heals. Your legacy endures." Lord Thornscar managed a faint smile, a rare crack in his stern facade. "Stay for lunch, at least?" Poirot demurred. "Non, we must return to London, but your hospitality, it is noted." Lady Evelyn Thornscar, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, joined them, her composure fully restored. The firelight caught the sapphire pin at her throat, a replacement for the jewels she'd sold. A secret Crow had uncovered but never fully exploited. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice warm but measured, "you've spared us scandal and worse. Thornscar owes you more than words." She extended a gloved hand, her sharp eyes softening. "My marriage, it was strained, but we'll mend it. Thank you." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the heart, like the estate, requires care. You will tend it well." Her nod was a promise, and as she turned to join her husband, Poirot saw a flicker of hope in their shared glance. Miss Lydia Hargrove, still fragile from Blackwood's betrayal, met Poirot in the garden where the fountain bubbled under the morning sun. Her blonde curls framed a face pale but determined, her locket, holding Crow's photograph, clutched tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite her red-rimmed eyes, "I'm leaving Thornscar. There's a nursing school in Bristol. I want to honor my aunt's skill, not her cruelty." The bruise on her wrist had faded, a metaphor for her healing. "I was blind about Elias, but I see now." Poirot's expression softened. "Mademoiselle, you are young, and the world is wide. Your heart is strong. Use it wisely." Hargrove's smile was small but genuine, a seed of a new beginning. She pressed a folded note into his hand, a simple thank you, and walked away, her steps lighter. Mr. Julian Thorne, the dissolute artist, was found sketching in the conservatory, his charcoal capturing the manor's silhouette. His green eyes, once sharp with mischief, held a quieter intensity. "Poirot," he said, setting down his pencil, "you saved my skin. Those debts are still a noose, but I'm done with gambling. I'll paint, maybe sell a few. Uncle's giving me a chance." His sketchbook, free of morbid images, now held landscapes, Thornscar reborn. Poirot nodded approvingly. "Monsieur, your talent is your salvation. Let it guide you." Julian's grin, less sly than before, suggested a tentative reform. "You're not half bad for a detective," he quipped, and Poirot's lips twitched in amusement. Colonel Bertram Fitzroy and Mrs. Violet Pembroke, cleared of suspicion, offered gruff farewells in the parlor. Fitzroy, polishing his war medal, grunted, "Fine work, Poirot. That Blackwood was a snake, knew it from the start." Pembroke, her pearls clicking, added, "My nerves are shot, but I'm glad it's over. No more shadows at Thornscar." Her hypochondria seemed tempered, her gossip less vicious. Poirot bowed politely. "Madame, Monsieur, peace is the best medicine. Cherish it." The infirmary itself was undergoing change. A new matron, a gentlewoman from Exeter, had arrived to replace Crow, her approach collaborative where Crow's had been tyrannical. The staff, shaken but relieved, worked with renewed purpose, the antiseptic air now carrying a hint of hope. Poirot toured the wards one last time, noting the empty bed where Blackwood's experiments had endangered lives. "The past is cleansed," he murmured to Hastings, "but vigilance remains." Inspector Grayson, before departing, met Poirot on the manor's steps, his notebook bulging with the case's details. Monsieur Poirot, your evidence, glove, journal, needle, it's airtight. Blackwood's trial will be swift. He shook Poirot's hand, his deference clear. You've a gift, sir. Ever consider joining the force? Poirot chuckled. Non, Inspector, my battlefield is the mind, not the badge. The final threads of the case were tied. The blackmail letters, Poirot confirmed, were Crow's tool for control, not profit, her way of binding the estate to her will. The string trick, the glove, the needle spring, all were Blackwood's design, his. Medical skill turned to murder. The red herrings, Fitzroy's medal, Pembroke's scream, the footprints, the dumbwaiter had been a mix of accident and intent, clouding the truth until Poirot's logic cut through. As the car to Exeter was prepared, Poirot and Hastings stood by the manor's gate, the infirmary a somber silhouette against the moors. Hastings puffed his pipe, reflective. Poirot, this place, it's like a novel, isn't it? Greed, betrayal, love, all locked in that room with Crow. You made sense of it all. Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice soft. Mon ami, the human heart is the true mystery. It locks away its pain, its ambition, its fear. But with method, with order, we unlock it. Blackwood sought to control his fate, but fate it is not so easily tamed. He paused, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth. Thornscar has learned this, and so we leave it to heal. Hastings grinned. You're a philosopher, Poirot, as much as a detective. Fancy a pint in Exeter before the train? Poirot's smile was indulgent. Perhaps, mon ami. But first I crave a tisane, something to soothe the grey cells. The car arrived, its engine a soft rumble against the estate's quiet. Poirot took one last look at Thornscar. The manor's towers, the infirmary's stark lines, the oaks standing sentinel. The case of the sinister matron was closed, its echoes fading like the fog. Justice had been served, not with vengeance, but with clarity, and Hercule Poirot, the master of mysteries, was ready for the next. As they drove away, the manor receded, its silhouette softening into the landscape. Thornscar would endure, its scars a reminder of truths uncovered, its future a canvas for redemption. And Poirot, ever watchful, carried the satisfaction of a puzzle solved, his grey cells already anticipating the next challenge.